Hey, hi guys. So, welcome to the study on the London system, right? So, today I will show you everything about it. And once you finish the study, make sure to use this opening in your own games, right? I'll also be putting in the links wherein you can practice with the computer itself, right? So, basically, this is the London system. There are uh, where the pieces usually go. These are squares where the pieces usually go. There are exceptions though. We will discuss as we proceed. But the pawns usually go on c3, d4, and e3. Right, the bishop stands on f4, and the other bishop is usually on d3. The knights are on d2 and f3 respectively, and this system is good for beginners as well as advanced level players as it does not have a lot of theory to memorize, and it is a system. It is not an opening, but it is a system. Also, the pieces are placed on these specific squares to have a simple idea that you want to attack on the king side, or if not, get a super solid structure that cannot be broken down easily. So usually we play a lot on the king side of the board, which is this side of the board, or else we usually try to gain some space on the queen side. So one of the best tries for black is to play uh, a Benoni kind of setup, which is d4 c5 or d4 knight f6 c5. But you're prepared against that, so you can either draw or win. So I have divided this course into like six sessions, or rather, like let's say, I'm super sorry, 5 sessions. So session one will cover all the main lines in the London that you can play. Those lines are what your opponent might play against you. So basically, this is moreover like about what 80% of might you all should expect to happen in the game, right? In section 2 today, I will cover the patterns in the London system. For example, those patterns that are usually used to master the London system. In section 3, I have covered traps that your opponent might fall for quickly, or those traps that have happened even in master games. Session 4, I'll show you games played by a grandmaster both with and against the London system. And session 5, I will give you good or better alternatives when you play the main line in the London. There are ways to counter the London system as well. So probably we can discuss about that in our next session. Uh, so yeah, so let's start with section number one, which is the introduction. Like I said, the setup will always remain the same. It's like b2, c3, d4, e3, and f2 are where the pawns kind of they form a pawn triangle, right? Is what I love to call it. The bishops are usually not. There are exceptions, but the bishops are usually on d3 and f4. The knights are on f3 and d2, and our main goal is to play on the king side. And if not, then we can always gain some space on the queen side of the board. So let's get started with chapter number one of section number one. So usually when it comes to the London system, of course, the first move is to kind of create that triangle that you need. So yes, you do indeed play the queen's pawn opening. So yes, d4, d5, and then comes the move knight f3. You can also go for bishop f4, which is also an alternative, but knight f3 keeps things hidden. You usually do not show your main plan to play the London, so it's better to delay bishop f4 rather than to go for bishop f4 right away. But you can choose if you are very confident about the London and all the other lines that we'll be discussing. You can definitely go for bishop f4. But or rather, let's just start off with knight f3, right? Knight f6, and then comes bishop f4. Usually we want to find or we want to create this triangle kind of setup, but the bishop should be outside the triangle or outside the pawn chain, right? So we'll now play bishop f4 first. So this piece placement lets black recognize that we are playing the London system. They already know that okay, we are already into that structure about where and what we need to create, what white needs to create. So let's say they play a move like c5, so very active move. So you support by playing the move e3, and then they go for rather, let's say, knight c6, then you again support by playing the move c3. So this is what we call, like I said, a pawn triangle or a pawn pyramid. The pawn pyramid is like this pawn structure. We usually do this only if they play the move c5, right? So let's go. Let's say, of course, they need to develop their own pieces. There are other alternatives like bishop g4, or yes, e6 is something wherein the bishop can come to d6, but we stick to our own plan and we play the move knight to d2, bishop d6. Of course, do not capture it. Instead, go behind, because this is something very basic, right? Why don't you capture it? Because if they capture, then you capture it with your h pawn, which unleashes the rook on the h file. So let's say they castle, because we are just talking about obvious moves over here, and then finally we complete the setup, or we complete the system with the move bishop to d3. Of course, they can play moves like c4, which is fine, but you can just like kind of retreat. So uh, probably bishop, I mean, c4 is met by bishop c2, so that you can control that long ranged diagonal. So let's say rook e8 with plans of e5 in the future. So now this is our middle game plan, right? They want to play e5, so we stop it by playing knight e5 followed by f4 ourself, and then reroute the bishop to h4, right? Reroute the bishop to h4 by playing knight e5, f4, and then bishop to h4 to give space for our pieces to attack. And we need to keep our light squared bishop because it is very important in the attack. So as you know, that if your pawns are placed on the dark squares, you need to essentially not exchange or keep your bishop till the end of the game. So far so good. So let's find the best move. Yes, of course, their threat is to play e5, so we stop it by playing knight e5 ourselves, and then we'll just play f4, castle our king, play bishop to h4, and give room for our rook to swing to f3. Like for example, yeah, it's like a rook lift, uh, swing over to f3 followed by g3, uh, and yes, then we will give uh, our queen the space to join the party, right? So our point being is, you want to create a king side attack and just destroy them, or destroy our opponent rather, respectfully, on the king side of the board. Alright, so far so good. So let's go to our second chapter in session 1, right? Which is a London system, but against the King's Indian setup. Right now, King's Indian setup is usually wherein they do not play moves like d4, d5 right away. Rather, they play moves like knight f6, g6, and bishop g7, so on and so forth, right? Like they fianchetto their bishop. So yes, we indeed stick to our plan. Oops, sorry, that was a mouse slip. We do not play d3. Yes, of course, we play the queen's pawn opening, which is to play uh, d4. Then they play the move knight f6, which is their most flexible option. So here there are some theories wherein you can just drop and play knight f3. But if they play the King's Indian defense, it's best to choose the move bishop f4 right away. Alright, and g6 is followed by, okay, so the reason why we do not play the move knight f3 over here is because we want to play knight c3 first, which provokes them to play the move d5, and then we play the move knight f3. So for example, if we play knight c3 and then they go bishop g7, that allows us to simply play moves like e4, queen d2, and then attack them on the king side. So this is an exception in the King's Indian defense, is we do not go for knight f3, but instead we choose the move knight c3, so that we can force a reaction out of them, which is to play the move d5, and then we are in our own territory, right? So yeah, so this is the small deviation. We usually put the knight on d2, but we can place it on c3, and then e3 is also possibly uh, the third move that we could play, but knight c3 is the best. So they have two moves, like usually they can play d5 or bishop g7 like I explained. d5 is the main line because it controls e4, stopping e4 ourselves, right? And if they play bishop g7, we can play moves like e4, queen d2, long castle, f3, and simply smash them on the king side of the board by playing h4 h5 or g4 g5 in the future. All right, so far so good. Let's say yes, of course they have to play the move d5, and then we can follow it up with e3, right? And then bishop d3 is also good, but rather in King's Indian defense we usually put our bishop to e2. I will explain why. So let's go knight f3, and this piece placement is known as the Barry's attack, right? Not the pawn pyramid, but the Barry's attack. So they play c5, and of course we do not play the move bishop d3 because of c4. And yeah, and there's also one more thing, that if you play the move bishop d3, it usually has no effect on black, because they have a nice setup of g6 h7 and f6, I mean f7, right? So basically yes, we do not put our bishop on d3 because it is just biting at the stone because of the g6 pawn. Alright, so far so good. So they play knight c6, and now we must play the move knight e5. This is important in all the London system lines, right? And okay, so far so good. They have castled. We can castle as well. Takes, and what is the correct move? Of course, the only possible move is, or the only accurate move rather, uh, to rephrase myself, is to capture the pawn on d4 with your e3 pawn, right? And they play the move queen b6 because now they are trying to put relentless pressure on these two pieces. So we just capture it, and then they take with the queen, of course. And then the idea is to play the move a4. Why? Because we want to play the move bishop b5 and then harass the queen by playing a5 in the future. Also, not to forget the fact that we are trying to gain some space on the queen side. So a very logical move for them to stop the move bishop b5 is to play the move a6, right? I hope everyone's understanding what's going on till now. And again, remember, this is against the King's Indian defense setups. All right, so far so good. So they play the move a6. Let's say a6, and again, let's just play the move a5 so that we grab a more space. And rather, the only piece which was left for them to develop was the bishop. So yes, they play bishop f5 and then keep attacking on the king side. Like I said, in the London system we always play on the king side. So yes, g4 is played, and we are attacking now. Bishop e6 is again the only move, right? Because where else would the bishop go? Pawn is well supported because of the e2 bishop and the queen on d1. So yes, let's go for knight a5 so that we can solidify our knight on let's go for knight a4 so that we can solidify our knight on c5. Remember, b6 is not possible because of the pawn, or in possible scenarios we can play moves like knight to b6. So yes, we want to place our knight on c5, and in order to stop it, right, or how would you say, a move that stops our ideas would be to play knight d7, and also makes sure that the bishop's file is opened up, right? So one move that we should must play is to control the semi-open file, and they would try to break open the position, but we have to uh, keep ourselves in the driver's seat. So you want to castle on the king side, gain space on both sides of the board, and just keep attacking, right? A good idea from here would be to supposedly, like, there are multiple ways, but a good way would be to start pushing h4 h5, or rather play a move like c3 in the future. There are ideas of playing rook a3 and maneuvering your rook to h3 or simply playing h4, king g2, rook h1, and trying to push on the king side of the board. So again, gain space on both sides, but play on the king side. Alright, so far so good. So this was all about the King's Indian setup. Right, now let's take a look at what happens if your opponent plays the Queen's Indian setup. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The Queen's Indian is when your opponent plays knight f6 and e6. So yes, d4, knight f6, and like I said, if they play the move knight f6 first, it's usually good to play bishop f4 first, right? Okay, bishop f4, and then yes, e6 is the Queen's Indian. Just play simple chess, follow up with your London system principles like knight f3 and then b6. Their idea is to control the e4 square by playing bishop b7, rather knight e4, f5, or probably d6, and so on and so forth. Setup like that. So yes, this is the QID setup, which is the Queen's Indian defense setup. We continue with our normal pyramid scheme, or the pyramid structure as we have like kind of named it. And yeah, knight bd2, our usual stuff, c5, c3, and now we have created the pawn pyramid like we just discussed. Bishop e7 is usually followed by a move like h3, since they are indirectly covering the g5 square adequately, right? Because if let's say, let's assume if the knight goes to d5, then they can play moves like g5. So in this case, we must now play h3 to give our bishop some room to fall back if the knight were ever to go to h5 or d5 for that matter. So yeah, these are some small nitty-gritties that you need to remember about the Queen's Indian defense or the Queen's Indian attack, whatever you call it, from the black side of the board. So yes, you must play the move h3, and then now I must say it is safe to develop your bishop on d3, because they do not have this g6, h7 and f7 structure, right? They do not have that stone. So now yes, so if they do not have the stone, bishop d3 is good. And yes, this is usually the Queen's Indian defense structure, with ideas like knight bd7, knight e4, f5. So it's best to like kind of castle from our side as well. Knight bd7, and now we must place our rook on e1. For now everything is controlled. It's good that our knight is on d2, so ideas like knight e4 are not usually possible. So now I believe everything is perfectly well matched, and I would say probably like just take a pause, or everybody in the chat can tell me what's the best possible move. Yeah, the best possible move is to exploit the center, and you can exploit the center by kind of unleashing with the move e4, and we strike the center immediately, right? And bishop f8, because I usually have no idea as to why they play bishop f8, but I would rather say to the idea is to play e5 themselves, right? When the bishop is on e7, the rook no longer has control over the semi-open or the closed open file, or the half open file rather, right? So now bishop f8's idea is to play the move e5, so we play e5 ourselves, and we are now better here because we are almost like plus 2.0. I mean up by 2 points, even though the material is equal. You have a strong king side attack going on, and you will surely win this game if you play appropriately with all the ideas defined. So one point to note is you want to create a king side attack with means of e4 followed by e5, and Greek gift sacrifices are best once the knight moves. So Greek gift sacrifices are like usually bishop captures h7, king captures h7, knight g5, Wherever the king goes, you follow it up with moves like queen h5, and it usually is game over. Alright. Alright, so far so good. So I hope everyone's understood what do we play against the d5 setup, what do we play against the king's Indian setup, and what do we play against the queen's Indian setup. So let's move on to other systems or other setups, right? Let's start with, do not worry, I'll be providing the description in the chat, wherein I'll be providing a link so that you can all practice all the 5 sections. But again, remember, this is just section number 1 that we are on to. And being this a summer camp, today we have a long day ahead of us. I will usually provide you with a small break in between for about 15 minutes. Yeah, and I will let you know when. Probably after we have completed section number 1. Yes, you all can keep your videos off. No need to turn them on. Yep, and always use the chat whenever possible. So let's go to the Benoni setup. Benoni setup is usually d4 knight f6, and then okay, we must play bishop to f4, and then they go right away striking in the center by playing the move c5. So yes, bishop f4 and then c5. So we push our pawn to e3, follow up with the usual pyramid thing. And now this is sort of important to remember, right? If the queen goes to b6, which probably most of the advanced players might do or choose, you need to by heart this move, because it is very difficult to find this move over the board. Usually you would mess up this position by playing a move like queen c1, and then things don't look good for you because of pawn takes, and then queen takes, losing the pawn on your fifth move itself. So knight a3 is somewhat that you need to by heart, right? Why? Now let's see what happens if the queen goes to b6. I mean, from queen b6, if the queen captures b2, usually this should not be an issue for you at all, right? Because you have moves like knight c4, and you also might end up trapping the queen. uh, you definitely should end up trapping the queen. This is what I will recommend, as it limits black's options. This is a small deviation, but we need to do this when it needs to be done, right? So let's say queen captures b2, and yes, again, not knight c4, but ideas with knight b5. The idea is to play, we are trying to fork, right? We are trying to create this double attack on the king and the rook. Not only that, probably, if they are not aware of the fact, moves like bishop c4, rather not immediately, but and rook b1 would lead to trapping the queen, right? So let's say, if now for example the threat is to play knight c7, so if knight a6 is played over here, then possibly you can follow it up with a3, followed by rook to b1, and then rook to b3, which just traps the queen after knight e2 and knight c1. Or you could just play bishop c4 and rook b4 to win the queen. So let's say, okay, then that's why they must play the move knight d5. So I cannot possibly explain how, like, I cannot spoon feed you. This is like basically, if knight a6 is played, then yeah, the computer indeed recommends moves like bishop c4, or moves like probably, yeah, rook b1, not right away. But why not right away is because I believe because of queen captures a2. So yeah, play a3 first so that it's well defended, and then rook b1 should win the game. Alright, so you need to calculate on the board itself. So yes, instead of playing knight a6 and side tracking their knight themselves, the best option for them is to move the knight towards the center of the board and then control the c7 square, right? So the correct idea, or the correct way to follow this up, would be to play the move knight to d5. Yes, knight d5 makes absolute sense. So yeah, once knight d5 is played, can you force a repetition or can you find a repetition? I am pretty sure the repetition can be found easily, and the repetition is rook b1, queen a2, rook a1, queen b2, rook b1, and then yeah, that's about it, right? So yeah, that is the move. So and then this would lead to a repetition, and pretty much you are usually happy because yeah, because when it comes to Benoni, it is probably the best way to counter the London system, and you can, if you can draw this position, that is fine. So the game has officially been drawn, and the point is you can either opt for a draw with rook b1, or you could play a3, then that leads to a force line. That would lead to a force line like a3, a6, rook b1, queen a2, queen c1, a into b5, rook a1, queen a1, rook captures a1. So like moves like, basically the what I'm trying to say is, if you do not want to play the move rook b1, you can play moves like a3, which is followed by a6. Then usually you play the move rook b1, which is followed by queen a2. Then you play hold on 1 minute. Yeah, then you play the move, I guess. Yeah, then you play the move queen c1, right? Queen c1, and then something along the lines of rook b2. So let's see. Yeah, this is an easy way to draw, like I said. Just keep moving. And yeah, queen c1 and a captures b5, rook a1, uh, queen a1, so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. mm, and yeah, this would lead to a complex game or an easy draw. So now let's talk about what happens if they play the move the Dutch, or they play the Dutch defense. So how do we tackle it, and what are the moves that we usually play? So d4, f5, and then our usual setup, bishop f4, knight f6 is followed by e3, uh, e6 is followed by knight f3, and again bishop e7, h3. Okay, we don't play this to save the bishop, but we play this for a secret plan that you will see later on. All right, not to save the bishop, but a secret plan that you will see later on. And then follow it up with knight bd2. They play again moves like b6 just to gain control or have their more power over the e4 square. Bishop d3, bishop b7, and then you have reached the pyramid structure, pyramid pawn structure. Then c5, no castling, rather the secret idea I said earlier. Here it comes, is the move. Oh no, it's not the move g4. So yes, the idea is to play the move rook g1 in order to play g4. Alright. So this makes a lot of sense. So you go rook g1 and then you play the move g4. Alright, so far so good. Uh, and we are about to play g4, but you will see some fun in these positions. So what would you do in this position? Yes, of course I would play a move a g4, and you are considered to be better here in this position due to the attack. And the point is, when you complete the system and play the move h3 and play rook g1, you are finally able to play g4 to blast open lines on the king side, right? Like ideas like yeah, rook g1 and then blast open the position on the king side. mm, Certain other ideas would be to play queen b3, if not right away, and like kind of long castle, or just maintain the king in the center of the board and see how your opponent proceeds, right? And the next one is the last setup of the day for section number 1, uh, which is London system against the Chigorin. So Chigorin is basically d4, d5. Yes, you play knight f3 and then knight c6. Follow it up with bishop f4, our usual setup. they play bishop to g4, and indeed we play the move e3. Alright, so far so good. e6 is played, and here we need to play the move c4. So we don't want to play passively with c3. We want to strike in the center with c4 right away. So this is another exception in the Chigorin defense, right, or the Chigorin setup rather. So alright, knight f6 is played, and then you follow it up with knight c3. Bishop b4 is usually followed up with rook to c1, and kick their bishop away with h3, right? If they take, it's good for us. So let's just recapture with the queen. A knight goes to e4, bishop goes to d3, and then they take it back with your pawn. And it's as simple as it gets, right? And play to win and have fun. And the point is, you want to punish their knight being on c6. So you play c4 to strike in the center instead of playing passively with c3. You know what? Let's probably see this system again, because this is something somewhat different from the other setups that you have seen so far. So yes, let's play d4, d5, and then of course when they play d5 you need to play knight f3. If they play knight f6 you need to play bishop f4. So knight f3, knight c6, bishop f4. Okay, let's say they play bishop g4, and then e3 is followed by e6, which leads to us playing c4 right away. Knight f6 is followed by knight c3. Don't have to really worry about bishop b4 because of rook c1, castle, and then h3, kick it away. If they go bishop h5, then you can play g4, so on and so forth. Queen f3, knight e4 is followed by bishop d3, takes, and bishop a3 is followed by rook b1. So one outro for this session is that you have made it so far in section 1, which is the main line of the London system. So let us look at section number 2, where we will cover the ideas and the patterns, right? Ideas and the patterns that we must look for as playing as white in the London. So let's start right away. Probably you guys can take a quick break for about 5 minutes. Till then you can keep your I mean, you can still sit and you can like just enjoy the intro for section number 2, which is uh, wherein we cover the ideas and the patterns. So like I said, this is the start of section number 2, and we will now learn about the key patterns and ideas in the London system. This will really help you to master the London system, right? And let's get straight to it right away without wasting any time. So yes, of course, the setup is usually the same: d4, e3, bishop f4, knight f3, knight d2, c3, bishop d3, and then you play along the king side. But remember this, that there are exceptions, right? There will be exceptions. So there are 8 patterns that I would love to discuss in section number 2 of the London system. Alright, so let's start. Right, how do you meet this move c5? Right, so what has happened is d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, or sorry, d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, e3, and they have played the move c5. So possibly you can comment or use your chat as to how white should proceed ahead with this line, right? And it is very easy. So how do you meet c5 with is the question. So c5 is usually met with c3, right? As simple as that. The reason why because is that we support the center and we are ready to face queen b6 with the idea of queen b3, and supposedly if they capture, it is completely good for white because we capture back with the a pawn, and the rook on a file opens up, so we have some counterplay on the a file. So queen b6 is met by queen b3, and the best move for them is to play c4 and not queen captures b3. But let's say if they take our queen, what should we play in this position? Of course, we play the move a captures b3 as I just explained, and they just help us because we have control over the semi-open A file, which we didn't have earlier because our rook was still blocked by our pawn. And then in the entire point is we want to support our d4 pawn and prepare to meet queen b6 with queen b3. So I repeat again, so if something like this happens and then they break open with c5 right away, we play the move c3, right? You can always rewind back because these sessions are recorded, and you can always rewind back and take a look at uh, the patterns and the main lines, so on and so forth. So let's go for pattern number 2. What if they play the move bishop d6? As I said, if they play a move like bishop d6, we usually do not meet it with the move bishop captures d6, as we help them improve the position of their queen. Instead, we go play a move like bishop to g3. So if they ever take our bishop, we take it with our h pawn and open up our h file. For example, if bishop captures g3, it is met by h captures g3, right? And also, maybe no one might tell you this, but if they exchange on g3, we are strategically and positionally winning. You may ask why, of course, right? Why is it that we are strategically and positionally winning? It is because they have exchanged their good bishop for our bad bishop, and that means that they have their bad light squared bishop while our light squared bishop is good. uh, because most of our pawns are on the dark squares. So if we have most of our pawns on the dark squares, it is usually to have a light squared bishop. So it is strategically winning because they just help us open up the h file for no reason, and that is why you should not take on g3 if you are playing as black. Okay, let's take a look at pattern number 3. If they play the move bishop e7, uh, okay, if they have already, or if they are ready to play the move knight h5 without us having the g5 for the bishop, play h3. This is an exception to the d5 setups because we want to preserve the bishop. So yes, play h3, and if knight h5 is played as shown on the screen, you can just fall back with bishop h2. Okay, castle, and then probably bishop d3 or c3 is the best idea. This is the normal London stuff. You have to save your f4 bishop and tuck it in on h2 if it is attacked, or if it is rather vulnerable, or if it's possible to kind of sort of create an attack. It's usually possible in the Queen's Indian uh, defense QID setup, right? So yes, some small things that we need to take care of. Okay, we are already into pattern number 3, so let's go and discuss pattern number 4. All right, if their c pawn is blocked by the knight, right? If their c pawn is blocked with the knight, we usually strike it with c4, like in the Chigorin defense or in the Chigorin system. So we don't play passively with c3 because they do not have a pawn on c5 like in the usual main lines. Like I said, it usually happens in the Chigorin, and our plan is to play knight to c3, rook to c1, then followed by taking on d5 at the right moment so that we can play knight b5. So yes, let's go knight c3, and you want to punish them for their knight being on c6, so you play the active c4 instead of c3, which is passive. Alright, so far so good. Let's go with pattern number 5. How do you meet the move bishop f5? Alright, so bishop f5 usually happens when d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, and then bishop to f5. So bishop f5, you play the move c4. Okay, now we are putting more pressure in the center. So yes, usually it would transpose to a Slav or a Chigorin based on what they play. Knight c3, yes. So they are playing the Slav, and they are trying to solidify the pawn with c6. They are trying to solidify the center by moving their pawn to c6. But now we can play queen b3 ourselves. They play queen b6. This is the most common move. but we just play c5 so that we can freeze the center and have gain more space, right? Again, we have the a file for our rook, as we have discussed before. You want to punish them for placing their bishop out into the woods by playing c4 and queen b3 to target the weakness on b7. Let's go recognize pattern number 6. Okay, so whenever it's possible, you can or you should plant your knight on e5 so that you can play f4 and ideas of castling and bishop h4. So yes, let's go play the move knight e5. If they ever take the knight, you take by the pawn, gain space on the king side, and for that reason they will commonly play bishop b7. So if they, let's say, if they take the pawn with their bishop, of course, I mean if they take the knight with their bishop, they cannot take it with the knight because of pawn captures the knight, which leads to a double attack, helping us win material. If they ever capture with the bishop, you just play pawn takes, and note that they do not have the knight h5 idea because of queen h5. So you can go play a move like f4. Alright, so far so good. So they play bishop b7, and you can play a move like f4 right away, or you can play a move like castle, and then you can play the move f4. Alright, so what is the point? So the point is you want to place your knight on the strong e5 square, followed by attacking on the king side. Alright, so far so good. Let's go to our second last pattern, which is pattern number 7. And this usually might take place if the knight from f6 is displaced, or if there is nothing to control the knight g5 advance, and we call this as the Greek gift sacrifice. So of course bishop captures h7, king captures h7. You can also go knight g5, or best possible way to is to keep it simple. Swing your queen to h4. If the king goes to g6, you can play queen g5, and now you can play queen h5. uh, King goes to g8, and then play the move knight g5, right? And they have become desperate, or because doesn't really matter, because this checkmate is unstoppable. So queen h7 is a checkmate. Again, like I said, these sessions are recorded, so you can always go back and take your time. So meet e5 pawn break with d captures c5 if it has a tempo, and followed by e4. Do not capture in the center, capture it on the side, because you gain some time, you gain some extra move, because this pawn usually captures the queen. So they must take it, and then you play the move e4 right away. This is why we are still slightly better in this position. We are able to break in the center, we have a good position, and you want to take the pawn on c5 to weaken the pawns a bit, and then you want to play e4 to further weaken their pawns in the center of the board. So like a quick outro, you all have passed the second session, or the second section rather, and probably take a break, absorb everything that you have learned, and let's move on to our next session in about 10 minutes, and we will discuss about the traps. Section number 3 will be about the traps that your opponent might fall for. Also, on the right hand side of your screen, you might discuss or you might see there is the academy's number, there is the academy's uh, website, and all the plans for the academy, and the description for the academy's uh, website, or the link will be posted soon after the session is done. So yeah, we have completed a good 45 minutes class. Take a 15-minute break, and I will see you all at 1 p.m. IST or 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Alright, so welcome back to part 2, right? And we will be covering section 3 and section 4. You all can keep your videos off, just be on mute, and let's have some fun, right? So basically, in these two sections that we'll be looking, section 3 and section 4. Section 3 we will be talking about common traps which your opponent might fall for if you are playing as white, and the London system. And section 4 will include games, very nice games in the London system by top grandmasters, right? So let's take a look at this. As we all know, London system is basically the pyramid pawn structure, right? Pyramid pawn structure followed by knights on d2, f3, bishops on f4 and d3. Usually you play along the king's side of the board and try to occupy space on the queen side whenever possible. So now that being said, and if you've seen the first part, which again I said I will be posting soon, let's go and start with, like, there are 5 common traps in the London system which your opponent is likely to fall for. So let's start with trap number 1. So the first move is fairly simple. Yes, you start off with d4, d5, and then usually you play the move knight to f3. Alright, so far so good. So once knight f6 is played, then you can play the move bishop to f4. And yes, this is probably like the most symmetrical structure that you will ever come across. So e6 is followed by e3, and then c5 is followed by c3. So far so good. This is all natural. Knight c6 is followed by knight b to d2, and we have successfully completed the London structure, apart from the fact that our bishop is on uh, f1 and not on d3. So as you all might know, it is essentially not good for us to capture the bishop, because then we are just promoting their development and we are getting uh, nothing fairly much worth. So yes, the idea is whenever the bishop goes to d6, you follow it up with moves like bishop to g3, and they get the castle, you play the move bishop d3, probably b6 with the idea of bishop b7. So we just need to be a little bit aware of the circumstances, and probably by hearting this is also a good idea. So yeah, let's start with the attack in the center right away, and kindly note this is where the trap actually begins, and most of the moves are forced from the black side of the board. So yes, we play the move e4, and their most common move is d captures e4. We do not want to lose this precious bishop, as a result of which we play the move knight captures e4, which is followed by knight captures e4, bishop captures e4, bishop b7. Probably taking is the best idea. Takes with the bishop, and then you play the move queen a4, which leads to all sorts of different positions. For example, yes, the queen over here attacks twice, that's why the rook must go to c8. And keeping in mind that we can have control over the open file, we can simply proceed or go ahead with the move rook to d1. Queen e7 is also possible. I would say queen e7, is this move possible? Let's think a little bit about it. Queen e7 is also possible, and followed by rook d8, but they usually want to exchange queens because of the pressure they are facing. So okay, alright, let's say if they play a move like queen to e8, and here's where the fun begins. You start off with the most favorite thing, probably, or the basic trap that you might have learned when you were kids, is bishop captures h7. This is known as the Greek gift. Bishop captures h7, king captures h7, and mind you, you follow this with the move queen to h4, which leads to probably king g6, and then again queen g5, king h7, which is followed up with queen to h5. Now once the knight goes to g8, you need to create, once the king goes to g8, you need to create threats. When I use the word threats, what I mean is you need to create a checkmating idea. So even if the king is in the center of the board, it doesn't really matter because the game is absolutely over for black. So you play the move knight g5, and queen h7 is pretty much forced, so they have to go bishop to f2, or bishop takes f2 rather. And over here it doesn't really matter with which piece you capture. You can either take it with the king or you can take it with the bishop. Let's say I take it with the king, and irrespective of whatever they play, right, irrespective of whether they go queen d8 or f6 or f5, I guess all the escape squares are controlled, and you can just slide your queen to h7, and yeah, this is a good game, a very nice and a pause finish, which leads to an instant checkmate, right? So yeah, we have started off this session with an amazing chapter number one of uh, yes, trap number one rather. So let's take a look at trap number two. Let's say we play the move d4, they play d5, and then indeed we go with our regular ideas like knight f3 followed by knight f6 and bishop f4, right? Everything seems fine, everything seems okay. e6 is played, a very symmetrical structure which leads to e3, and c5 leads to c3. So this is pretty much the same thing that we discussed in trap number 1. So yes, knight c6 is played, and then knight to d2. As we all know, bishop d6, again some basic stuff. Just do not take the bishop, instead just go back, and once they castle we follow up again with bishop to d3. So if they play a move like queen e7, which is rather good because they have ideas like playing rook d8 in the future, as soon as they go play the move queen to e7, you just simply play the move like knight to e5, right? You just need to control the center right away. So knight to e5 is played, and then after knight d7, because they want to like kind of get rid of this knight, so just take the knight on d7, bishop captures d7, bishop captures d6, queen captures d6, take the pawn. Let's say they take the pawn again, and as we have discussed in our previous class, we just play the move e4. Oh, it's not e4, then probably it's something like the Greek gift. Let's see if we can find the tactic in this position. Hmm. Take a minute to kind of think about this and take a look at what's exactly going on, what's the mess, or what kind of a setup is this. Probably queen h5 would lead to something like g6, and then the bishop on d3 is rather not placed well. So what do you think if we play the move bishop captures h7? That would lead to king captures h7, which would lead to queen captures, sorry, queen h5. And then after king g8, you find this very beautiful idea to play the move knight to e4. So yes, let's go ahead with this. Bishop captures h7 is the move. King captures h7, of course they need to take. Then we go queen h5, king goes to g8, and then comes the very important knight e4. If they move the queen away, we simply play the move knight g5. So they have to play a move like pawn to g6. Now what do? We just take the queen, they take, we take the bishop now, and again, the rook is in danger, rook goes to d8, and we end up winning multiple number of pawns. So again, an amazing trick. If what happens if they do not follow their usual routine and they play a move like queen to e7. So let's go take a look at all of these things, or trap number 2 real quick. d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, bishop f5, or rather e6 for that matter. Just play e3, which is followed by c5, and indeed the pyramid thing, knight bd2, bishop d6 is followed by bishop g3, castles bishop d3, and then they play the move queen e7 instead of following up with moves like rather b6, which we saw in the previous trap. So of course we firstly need to, in order to have the Greek setup, the knight on f6 should not exist. So after knight d7, just take it, the bishop takes, and then play bishop captures d6, queen captures d6, pawn takes, queen takes, and then you play bishop captures h7, which leads to king captures h7, which leads to queen h5, and everything is forced because of knight e4. They cannot take the knight because queen captures the queen, as I've repeated n number of times. If the queen goes back, then knight g5 is a forced checkmate, so they play g6, and it's pretty much over. So you end up taking everything that's left on the board, and you're left with many extra pawns. Let's say, how many extra pawns do you got? You all have two extra pawns, so which is very crucial, and these are connected passed pawns which can kind of blow up the position right away, right now. So let's study trap number 3. Right now, what is trap number 3? Trap number 3 is the same in the London system. How we usually start off with is we play the move d4, d5. And always remember, if they play knight f6, you need to play bishop f4 first. So because they have played d4, d5, the usual routine, knight f3, a knight f6, bishop f4, e6, or for that matter c5. If they play c5, remember we should not play a passive thing like c3 over here. So let's go with e3, and then knight c6 is followed by c3. Alright, so far so good. I believe we have reached the same pyramid pawn structure, and then comes knight b to d2, e6. Usually we play bishop e2 or bishop d3, but here's where the trap starts. So bishop b5, bishop d6, and then you go on to play a move like queen a4. Castles just take, and probably take, and then they take, and then you set up a very nice trap with knight to e5. Firstly, the most natural move is actually a blunder, right? What is the most natural move? The natural move is to play knight c6, and because to protect the pawn, this pawn has been attacked twice. So the natural move is to play rook c8. So in order to prevent knight c6, which is indeed a blunder, and then they end up losing the knight right away. All right, so good. So far so good. Let's go and take a look at this entire fiasco right again. d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop to f4, c5. We play the usual setup with e3. Knight c6 is played. Again, play a waiting move like c3, and then after bishop g4, you play knight b to d2. You've reached the original position with some small nuances like the bishop being away from the pawn chain, right? The bishop is not inside the pawn chain but outside the pawn chain, and this is where the trap begins. You play bishop b5, bishop d6 is followed. Play a move like queen a4. In order to threaten multiple things, you simply take, and then take, and then you take, and then they take. And of course, do not take right away. Just create a threat to capture this pawn. And their most natural move, which is rook c8, leads to an immediate disaster. Knight g4, knight g4, pawn captures, pawn on c5, threatening to take the queen, and then you go easy by playing the move queen to g4. Alright, so far so good. So we have completed 3 of the 5 traps that we were supposed to discuss. Now let's go and discuss the 4th trap. Again, like I said, the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and take a look at each and every trap. d4, knight f6. Okay, because they have played the move knight f6, we play the move bishop to f4, and then they follow it up with the Queen's Indian defense, or the QID structure. So knight f3 is followed by c5. This is of course the Benoni or the Benko, however you would like to call it. and knight c6 is followed by the trap which will begin. Usually the normal move is c3, but we will set up a trap with the move knight to c3, right? Instead of playing c3, play the move knight to c3. And the most common move is d4, but it is a blunder. It is a blunder because of the move knight b5, and queen a5 is followed up with c3, right? And e5 is again followed up with, remember how our pieces are well placed, they are coordinating very nicely. So yes, and you end up winning an extra pawn. So always remember these Benko nuances. D4, knight f6, knight, not knight f3, we play bishop f4 first. E6 is followed by knight f3. If they play c5, you play e3. And let's say we play the move e3, which is followed by knight c6, and then you play the move knight to c3, because d5 is a very natural move which leads to an immediate disaster. Alright, so far so good. Let's go and finally study the last trap, which is trap number 5. Okay, d4, mm, let's say d4, knight f6, bishop f4, right? And again, same the QID defense, so you go play the move knight f3, c5 Benko, follow it up by playing e3, and b6 again, knight bd2. All of this looks very natural. And if they play bishop b7, now comes the main idea of going knight to c4. Now this is a very provoking move because it just provokes black to play d5 or d6, thinking that our threat is knight d6 check, but that is not our threat. If they play d6, we take on c5, and once we take on c5, they could take with the b pawn or the d pawn. If they take with, or they take by the d pawn, we exchange the queens and play knight g5, and once again they defend with king e8, and we play the move knight e5. So if they take by the b pawn, then we can just take uh, the d6 pawn, which is absolutely free. You'll understand what I'm trying to say, right? So yes, so let's say they play the move d5, which is very natural. So you go knight c e5, hitting that f7 target, and they probably might develop, which leads to bishop b5, and then a6 leads to the move knight to g5. This is as simple as it gets. And then you play knight e captures f7, queen takes, probably take, and h6 would lead to a complete mishap. So we have already exchanged multiple pieces and we are an exchange up, right? So far so good, but the only thing about the London is probably you need to memorize all these traps, right? Memorizing is somewhat important, or like I would say it's rather very important, right? And bishop b7, knight c4, like I said, uh, the threat is to go this and then play knight d6. So yes, they play d5, and then knight e5 is a complete disaster, because after knight bd7 you play bishop b5. a6 would just lead to knight g5. They must capture, and then takes, probably queen e7, takes, h6, and then knight to g6. Alright, so here's what I'll suggest. Well done, firstly, you have made it this far, and now probably we can move on to analyzing some top GM games. So just give me a minute and I will load up the position real quick. Okay, so now let's review some games in this system so we can grasp probably all the ideas, the traps, the patterns, as well as the theory, right? So let's go. Let's take a look at this. Let's start with game number one, and the game number one was played between. Okay, let's see. Who was it played between? I do not know exactly who was it played between, but oh yeah, yeah, I know it was played in between Ajay Karthikeyan and Raikalajka A. So yeah, let's see how the game went. Alright, let's see how the game went. So the game started off, of course, the London system. So d4, d5 was played, and yes, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, e3, c5, c3, the normal London system setup. Right, knight c6 was followed with knight b to d2. We have made the pyramid, we have set up the two knights respectfully on f3 and d2. The bishop is on f4, and probably the only move that is left for us to play after bishop e7 is bishop to d3. Knight went to h5, and what led is fairly nice, right? What led was white playing the move bishop to g3. Knight captures g3, h captures g3, with the idea of us attacking on the king side. So h captures g3 was played, h6 was played, queen e2. Wow, a very nice idea as well. Nothing bad about it. The idea is to simply break open the center. The idea is to play moves like e4, right? So bishop d7 was played, and then comes d captures c5. The pattern, right? This is also an idea to get queen side majority of the pawns. So d captures c5, bishop captures c5, e4 was played, of course, d captures e4, and then knight captures e4. Now we have the queen side majority. We have 3 versus 2 on the queen side, and they have 4 versus 3 on the king side. So again, bishop e7 was followed with us with the typical London idea of playing the move g4, which led to them playing queen c7. And we do not stop, we just keep expanding. The computer does say that black is slightly better, but when it comes to uh, human conditions, right, just playing on the board, over the board, or against somebody online without having the engine by your side, g5 looks very terrifying. So simply the threat is ignored because bishop captures g5 would lead to us winning an extra piece altogether, and h captures g5 is a fool's move because of rook captures h8. So let's see how the game progressed. Black simply ignored what white was doing on the king side and played long castle, which was followed up with g captures h6, g captures h6, and of course we also need to safeguard our king. So long castles looks quite fine to me. f5 was played, which resulted in knight g3. We need to maintain some pieces on the king side, but I would rather say we kind of need to transition slowly on the king side as well. So a6 was played, and king b1, which is a uh, usual move in when you castle long, so that you have no ideas of bishop g5 check or the queen attacking your king on the c file. So king b1 is like just a prophylactic move to safeguard your king further, right? So I think so far everything is fine. So far everything looks good. Bishop d6 was played, which resulted in us playing the move knight h5. Now, if you ask me why, here's the thing. When bishop was on e7, it was controlling this entire diagonal, which means it was also controlling the f6 square. So you place the knight on h5. That is a good knight on the king side, right? A very good knight rather. So king b8, and this is a common idea when you castle queen side to make your king safer, like I just said. So g3 is a little inaccurate, but like I said, it's okay. Knight g7 is the best because then you have ideas of playing bishop c4, probably rook e1, but I guess he just wanted to play a move like g3 so that he can cement his knight on f4. Alright, so far so good. e5 was played. Alright, e5 was played, and then which led to knight to h4. Now the threat is to capture on f5, so e4 was played and bishop c2. Like I said, complex games might take place, and they will definitely happen if you're playing against somebody of your caliber. Knight e5, which led to knight f4 with the idea of exchanging the knights, or rather f4 is now a weak square. So bishop b5 was played. Inaccuracy, knight g4 was the best, which led to queen h5. Now we need to just focus on the f5 pawn. We need to kind of somehow keep pressurizing or keep putting pressure on the f5 pawn. Again, knight d3 inaccurate because of knight captures d3, e captures d3, bishop captures d3. If bishop captures d3, then rook captures d3. So bishop c6 was played in order to maintain the two bishops advantage. Rook h e1, of course, centralizing your rook. Queen goes to b6 with the idea of playing queen captures f2. So simply ignoring the threat and playing bishop c2 ourselves, queen f2 was played. Again, rook to f1, queen captures g3, led to knight captures f5, which will help us regain the double bishop advantage, or help them lose the double bishop advantage. Queen e5, rook e1, queen f6, rook captures. What a move, right? Rook captures, and then followed by queen h2, which pins the rook. So rook d8 is forced, putting pp on pp, which is putting pressure on pinned pieces. Rook d1 was played. I hope everything is fine so far. So far so good, right? And king c7 is forced, which leads to c4 with the idea of playing the move c5. b6 is played. a3 again. Bishop e8 is an inaccuracy because now b4 c5 looks sort of unstoppable, and this was a major blunder. Bishop g6 because of rook captures d6, rook captures d6, and the amazing move c5, right? B captures c5, b captures c5, bishop captures f5, queen captures, takes, everything falls, and this is simply winning because white has an extra bishop, right? So basic play in the opening, followed by some uh, tough decisions in the middle game, as well as how do you end it with style. So far so good. Let's talk about game number 2 over here, and this was played between it is a blitz game which was played between Nakamura and Aronian. Both of them are like the strongest players to ever play the game, and they're also in the top 10. Used to be in the top 10. Nakamura still is, but Levon nonetheless has won a lot of brilliant championship and has played brilliant chess in the freestyle Weisenhaus events. So let's start with, okay, d4, knight f6, and then again, because knight f6 is played, bishop f4 is essential. King's Indian setup, so yes, we play the move knight c3. The idea is if they go bishop g7, then we can play e4. So e4 was played after bishop g7, which led to d6, queen d2, knight c6, and probably something vague was played, which is d5. But yeah, long castle is the best. uh, so basically you can play long castle if h6, h3, a6, knight f3, and then probably kind of do something like this. But okay, all right, because this inaccuracy was played, knight e5 led to bishop h6, takes, c6, and then takes h3. Why? Because we need to prevent uh, the move knight to g4. So alright, queen b6 was played, and then again rook b1, rook b8 was played, and let's see what happens. Rook b8 was played, which led to queen d2 again. Bishop a6, and I believe this is an inaccuracy because okay, we are just getting ahead in development now. Queen a6 and b3. Alright, rook b4, f3. Queen b6 was followed by a3 again. We're just constantly attacking, and so here's what happened. Queen e3. This is a blunder, right? Because of rook captures e4, and then yeah, I mean, what will happen, right? Everything is just lost. So it does not make any sense. But nonetheless, let's see how the game proceeded. Knight captures e4 was played, and then all sorts of things happened. Yeah, probably just going over it too quick. But yeah, there is nothing much to discuss about after one has lost the queen. And I guess Eronian made a blunder in this position. Oh yeah, that was a blunder, right? So irrespective, Eronian was winning, but Nakamura somehow won. So the basic thing, or the basic idea, is to not play moves like d5. Usually when the King's Indian setup is allowed with the move e4, you usually go for long castle, then followed uh, by playing the move d5, right? Like you can play long castle over here. If they kind of short castle, then probably you can go for moves like f3, so on and so forth. All right, so cool. That was about it with regards to game number 2. Let's see game number 3 between Kramnik and Duda, Jan Duda, in 2015 Blitz World Chess Championship. So again, I would like to go over the initial moves quick. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, knight f3, b6, e3, bishop b7, knight bd2, bishop e7, and h3 is important because we want to give our bishop an escape square on h2. Castle was played, bishop to d3, c5 was followed by castle, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, d6 followed by c3. So now if you see, white has a queen side majority and black has a king side majority. So far so good. Knight bd7 was followed up with the idea of rook e1, and just simple chess, right? a6 was followed by a4. This is a common idea where you play a4 to stop any further expansions from black with b5. Rook e8 led to playing bishop h2. This is a prophylactic move which anticipates the move e5, right? So alright, knight f8, knight c4, knight g6, a bit of maneuvering going on, right? So a5, which led to them playing b5, and knight to b6 was followed by rook a7, and b3 again. No need to gain control of the central squares. Some simple basic stuff. d5, bishop f6, a little weird, but rook b1 is the best. But Kramnik played an inaccuracy, which is to go rook a3, which was followed by e captures d5, rook captures e8, queen captures, pawn captures, bishop captures, and bishop g6. Bishop captures f3, takes the pawn one more time so that we don't lose material, followed by rook captures f3. Rook e7 led to basic expansion. This is usually a draw, but it's okay. Bishop f4 just to make an escape square. Queen b5, queen captures b5, a captures b5, rook b3 was played with rook a7. And let's see how uh, what happened in the game. So bishop d2 was played, bishop d2 was played, and then bishop d4 was played, takes, and bishop c5. So usually this is winning. You just need to play accurately, right? You can just repeat, and this leads to yeah, White simply going from bad to worse to worse to bad to bad to whatever, and then finally, yes, it's just a tug of war, and white wins by playing the move rook to d8. So again, this is all about understanding patterns, concepts, and the way in which you should be playing the London system. Alright, let's go for the final game or the last game. And as usual, this game was played between uh, Dmitriyevich Yavenko and Rachmanov Alexander. Right, let's see what happened in this game. So d4, d5, knight f3, Chigorin setup, bishop f4, bishop g4, followed by e3, e6 and c4. Oops, e6 and c4 is important. Knight f6 and we play the move knight to c3. Bishop b4 is met by rook c1. So in the Chigorin, you should always play knight c3 and rook to c1. So yes, castle, bishop e2, takes, bishop goes to d6, bishop g3, just playing all those natural moves. Bishop h4 again a nice way. h6 short castle, g5, bishop g3. Okay, knight captures g5 was the best is what the computer says, but okay, bishop captures g3, f captures g3, e5, d5, e4, knight d4, takes, everything is dissolved, and then comes the important, right, maneuvering of the pieces. So I think that's about it when it comes to understanding traps and finding patterns, right? So you can always study these games by yourself, right? Use chessbase or use chess, and you can find a database or a mirage of these games. So that's about it, and in our next session we will uh, be now discussing other variations of the King's Indian or the Benko and the Benoni and other things. Alright, so far so good, and I will see you after a quick break of 15 minutes.